Thank you very much, Professor Sandoli, for taking the time to come to talk to us. Professor Sandoli is a professor for conflict analysis and resolution at the School for Conflict Analysis, and have taught and written about violent conflicts for decades. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. We'd like to talk about a little about Libya today. It seems that the American public is not really aware of what the mission and the war in Libya is all about. And we have not been informed. There is a lot of wrangling within the Congress and less debate in the public. We just wanted to hear some of your thoughts on this.
Well, there's lots of wrangling between the White House and the Congress as well with regard to the War Powers Act. That was a result of the Vietnam War some 30 plus years ago. And the Congress isn't sure what the President's mission is in Libya. And the President may not be clear what his mission is in Libya. He seems to have followed the British and the French, Prime Minister David Cameron and President Sarkozy in going into Libya, then backing away, allowing the French and British to take the lead via an air war, but claiming that the air war is not a war, not hostilities. This is our President Obama, so there was no need to invoke the War Powers Act. It's all very muddled, unclear, but clearly people are being killed in Libya by NATO, primarily British and French planes, but not only, with American munitions being provided, since the British and French are running out of ammunition, apparently. Hence, Secretary of Defense Gates' warning to NATO last week that NATO may face a dim, if not dismal, future because Americans are becoming sick and tired of being the policeman for the world. The original idea seems to have been to prevent Colonel Gaddafi, the ruler of Libya, from slaughtering his own civilians, primarily in Benghazi, a major rebel-held city in the eastern part of the country. That goal seems to have been achieved, but more recently, NATO seems to be hitting more and more targets, including Tripoli, the capital of the country, and in the process killing civilians, which is not looking too well to the rest of the world that's quite bothered by the American operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. After all, Libya is another Muslim country, and for many Muslims worldwide, this may be the third Muslim country that the Americans are killing people in. The Americans plus others. So from a public relations point of view, it doesn't look good. From an economic point of view, it's additional stress on the American economy. And the big question is, has it been effective? No. Thus far, we seem to have an impasse, a stalemate, between Colonel Gaddafi and the rebels. And we're not sure who the rebels are. Are they people who have fought Americans in Iraq and Afghanistan? Are they jihadis? If they take over in Libya, will they produce a jihadi type country that hates Americans and hates Europeans? So these are all unclear as to now what the answers might be.
You mentioned that the goal of the mission from the early on, as was expressed by the French and the British and later by the Americans, was to protect civilians.
Yes, it's an example of responsibility to protect. R2P was created in 2005 by the UN World Summit, following the debacle, the disasters in Rwanda in 1994 and Srebrenica in Bosnia in 1995, where the world stood by as leaders killed their own people under the dubious cover of sovereignty. So R2P, responsibility to protect, some 10 years later was legislated as a part of international law to prevent a replay of that painful past. And that's what's meant to be going on in Libya, protecting civilians who are being killed by their own government.
From the perspective of conflict analysis and resolution, if was there opportunity to say the rebels once they were protected and they were able to hold all of Benghazi, for them to be told, well, do not march on into war, going towards Tripoli. Is this something that's been discussed or has been
As far as I know, the subtext of the mission is to get rid of Gaddafi.
Okay, so yeah,
The primary goal is to protect civilians, but the subtext is to get rid of Gaddafi, regime change. But that's not the official mission that the UN Security Council ordained. But that's the subtext, that's what everyone wants, including the United States. So the rebels wouldn't have been told this until they got rid of Gaddafi.
So what does this mean in the long run? Are we here in the United States have to live with another broken country that we have to fix later? What is the prospect of Gaddafi leaving power and the prospect of deadly civil war? Because apparently we are not in the country, there are no troops within...
No, but we're participating in bombing from 30,000 feet with aircraft, and therefore participating on the side of the rebels, whomever they are. I think the major question that's really left dangling is, what do you do if more than one candidate for R2P responsibility to protect presents itself? We have Syria, where arguably you have more egregious violations of human rights taking place than in Libya. Yet nothing's being done about Syria. And then we may have a renewal of the Darfur situation, which you know so much about.
Yes.
So if you have genocide or near genocide taking place in more than one country at a time, what does the international community do? What should it do? And that's another question that's being raised here. So we have Libya, we have intervention, no obvious positive outcomes thus far, except civilians have been protected, but some are being killed now. More are being killed by Gaddafi, but some are being killed accidentally by NATO. But then you have Syria, where people are being driven into Turkey if they're still alive.
10,000 civilians that have crossed into Turkey. What is your worst fear about Libya? What is your worst fear?
My worst fear is we'll have more than one R2P candidate at a time and we will not know what to do, which will call into question the whole notion of protecting civilians from the ruthless dictator governments.
So reimagining what this whole doctrine is all about, the R2P.
Well, I think that's essential to revisit it. How should it be dealt with? I think if you have more than one country where people are being slaughtered at the same time, as in Syria, where nothing's being done.
What would you like to see happen? What would you like to see happen in Libya?
I'd like to see a negotiated settlement that leads to Gaddafi stepping down, and a post-Gaddafi government comprising some of the rebel elements and some of his people who were not quite in cahoots with him, but represent the government.
Is there any process that is underway for such a process?
I think there is, yeah, as we speak.
Okay. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for your time. Thank you.